Okay, we'll get started with our pre-meeting agenda. And first item is the new Bookmobile. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. We have the opportunity this evening to see the new Bookmobile. The library invited that opportunity for tonight as a part of our pre-meeting. If I could invite Kate from the library here to the podium to tell us a pinch about it, and then we can walk out and check it out and then reconvene back in here, if that's okay with all of you.
Because a picture is worth 1,000 words. I will keep it very short because it's a very cool looking bookmobile. It arrived 3 days before Christmas, so we kind of felt like Santa Claus came, but it wasn't Santa Claus that actually made it happen. It was a combination of the city and the county putting some of the 1 cent funds together, and it's, I think, a very good, visible symbol of the two entities working together. The previous bookmobile was 17 years old. It actually arrived like a month after I arrived here. So I didn't get to see that build up to it, but I have been with this one. We purchased it from the company, or the company that built it is the same company that does the Snap-on tool trucks. We're very, very pleased with the quality and the thought that went into it. The additional thing that this bookmobile has that the previous one didn't is a lift. So it is now ADA accessible and will be able to serve, hopefully in the near future, nursing homes and assisted livings, as well as help our staff rotate books in and out, or carts in and out. We are planning on a very, very limited opening services next month, as long as things stay the way they are. To some of the daycares, we're not yet, the nursing homes and assisted care centers are not ready for us yet. But the daycare centers have been begging for us to come bring some items to them. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I really think going out and seeing it is the coolest part.
Any questions?
I think it's right out here.
Okay, yep.
It's just right out this door.
And the partnership that's involved with respect to making this paving project happen. Coates Road is a road of multiple jurisdictions, the city and the county. And a number of months ago, some neighbors in the area approached the city and suggested that somehow a three-way partnership be considered in order to put some paving in some of the parts of the road that are causing the most distress with the neighbors as it relates to dust control and mitigation and those kinds of things. So after visiting with the neighbors and visiting with the county and so forth, we basically have a three-way partnership wherein each of the entities, if you will, the city, the county, and the neighbors, are participating by a third to make the project happen. We have tonight some elements of consideration on your consent agenda, and in the spirit of being sensitive to the notion that many of you may not be aware of what this project is and how the relationship came together, I have asked Andrew to come and answer any questions that you might have or share technical details that I missed in my broad overview of what this is about. And so if it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, to invite Mr. Beamer up, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Beamer?
Mayor, Council, I'm not sure I can add a lot. Coach Road, for those of you who don't know where it's at, is located west of Casper, south of CY. And the first 1,400 feet or so are inside city limits, and then south of there to the foothills of the mountain is all county jurisdiction. So we're looking to pave the first 1,400 feet, 26 feet wide, just to make it black. No curb and gutter, no street lights, no sidewalks, but just to knock down the dust and the blowing gravel and that kind of nuisance for those residents out there. And as Carter mentioned, is a third and a third and a third, and the cost for that 1,400 feet is about $200,000. So the city would pony up about $66,000. The county's going to pick up $66,000, And the property owners out there, which I think are in the neighborhood of 19, would pick up the other 66,000 between them all. The assessment will be based off acreage, based off how much acreage you have that accesses that road. There is a separate MOU in the packet tonight, and that is because the county wants to continue paving Coach Road for an additional 1,000 feet. So we're going to design that for them, but they're going to pay for that entire cost for that additional paving. So I am happy to answer any additional questions council may have.
Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Mayor, one more element that I might add, and Andrew, you can correct me if in fact this isn't the case, but at one point we agreed that as a part of this, the county would perform the plowing services out there since they're out there for the most part anyway. So if I remember correctly, that'll be part of the operational agreement as well.
That was discussed and was agreed to. Now the question is it part of the MOU? And Carter, I do not know in minutia if that's included in the MOU or not. But we'll make sure that we have a gentleman's agreement and we consummate that agreement to make sure that happens.
Councilman Nell.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So, just to be clear, if the council approves this, it's a one-time shot. There's no maintenance down the road. There's no other money that we're going to have to put forth in this particular project. Is that correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
Mayor, council, that is not correct, but a great question. Once we pave the road, it's going to need crack sealed. It'll eventually need potholes patched. It'll eventually need resurfaced, and that will be on the city's nickel to do so.
And I understand that. My question was, once we put the infrastructure in, the asphalt, are we on the hook 5 years from now to go in and curb and gutter it and put in sidewalks and street lights and all of those types of things? So that's my question.
Mayor, Councilman, no. I mean, if they elect to have those types of amenities, it'll have to be on their nickel or some other agreement down the road.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the North Platte Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Andrew's not going to get too far away here because we got to bring him back up to discuss some of the change orders associated with this project. This too is one that's been going on for quite some time and involves a significant amount of resources, a partnership with the state, and a project that's sorely needed in terms of our sanitary sewer system, a major portion of our sanitary sewer system. And so I've asked Andrew to kind of go through the elements of consideration for this evening that's on consent and entertain any questions, again, in the spirit of trying to catch our new folks up and have everybody on the same playing field tonight.
Mr. Beamer.
Mayor, Council, Carter is correct. This is what we consider to be our trunk line. We refer to it as the interceptor sewer because all of the sewers within the Casper and surrounding communities tie into that and carry it all the way from PV out to the wastewater treatment plant off of Bryan Evansville Road. It's a total length of 9 miles, ranging in size from 24-inch up to 54-inch. Keep in mind a typical residential sewer main is 8 inches going down everybody's street. So these are substantial sanitary sewer mains that we're looking at. 9 miles. Based off a study that was done in 2012, we thought we needed to rehab approximately 2 miles of it. And then we have Jacobs under design right now, under contract for design, and during their pre-design, they identified an additional 4,500 feet that will also need to be addressed as part of this project. So this is what you see in front of you tonight, is the additional design services to include that into the bidding package. It's a big project. We've got a SRF loan for $8 million from the state, which is the partnership that we have with them. And that will fund, hopefully, the entire construction and obviously the engineering fees for this project. So I'm be happy to answer any additional questions.
How long would it take to do this project?
We are still, Mayor, Council, we are still in design, so we haven't yet to pick the rehab strategy and what it may be weather dependent on when we can get this done, but I imagine it will stretch over 2 construction seasons.
Will it affect the households and the sewer lines now as they're operating?
No, and there will be no, well, I won't say there won't be any impact to the public, but not to your sewer system. But as you can imagine, if we have to bypass pump the sewer around with the rehab strategy that's selected, those are massive undertakings. So there may be some surface disruption to traffic trying to get around, but not to the sewer system itself.
Any other questions? Councilman Kathy?
Back one for just a second.
Sure.
Repeat what you said about the fire protection out there
Out.
on Coach Road.
He's going back to Coach Road.
Oh, Mayor, Councilman, I don't think I mentioned anything about fire protection out there.
What was the county supposed to take care of?
Plowing the snow plowing operations.
That is not in the MOU.
And that's what I told Carter, I wouldn't commit to it being in there or not.
Is that something that we should amend on the floor as we go through this?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Kathy, I don't think we need to amend the agreement that way this evening. However, with respect to conversations we'll have with the county, and if that is determined that an amendment is needed, we would just simply ask that we bring an amendment back and take care of it at that point. But for tonight, I wouldn't suggest that we go that route. Okay.
Your mic.
Oh. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Beamer.
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll move on to the financial support for the employees at the Ford Wyoming Center. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much to the credit of our partners up at the Ford Wyoming Center with Spectra, as we were going through the design of our budget nearly a year ago now, they offered to reduce their costs in order to help us save money with respect to the subsidy that would ordinarily be required of the city in an ordinary operational sort of run-of-the-mill year as it relates to our relationship with Spectra. And so they offered a budget of just about $800,000, which is significantly less than what we would ordinarily budget for the subsidy that's required from the city to operate the event center. And in the meantime, many more events got canceled. We're still in a situation, in an environment where events are getting canceled. We're hopeful that that is beyond us. I don't know how much we can be hopeful in that regard, but that's certainly my hope. Nonetheless, the costs are such that they do need to be increased. And as a matter of fact, Spectra is suggesting that their operational costs do need to be increased and captured to a larger degree than what we expected back in May of last year. The proposal for the council this evening is whether or not council would be amenable to the idea of, on a marginal basis, providing that extra piece of funding that allows their employees to get back to work sooner than later at a capacity that would be consistent with what they normally get paid. The Ford Wyoming Center employees are those who have taken quite a bit by way of not only furloughs that have extended into the 6-week period of time, but in many cases layoffs and reduced salaries for an extended period also. I do have Mr. Cortez here this evening to address some of the nuances that you might be curious about as it relates to our relationship with Spectra. Certainly beyond my typical understanding as it relates to those contractual language issues and so on. But I certainly would suggest that with respect to the advent of funding that we didn't anticipate, that $43,000 really isn't a whole lot to be concerned about as it relates to getting folks back to work and getting their salaries restored, particularly since they've been almost the epicenter, if you will, of salaries that have been curtailed and time off that's been, mandated and so on. So that's what I'd recommend. However, I want you to ask questions and feel comfortable with the direction we're going, and then, of course, tell us what you'd like to see.
Councilman Nell.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, I do have a couple questions. Number one, I want to know if CARES money can be used for that. And number two, I'm just going to be honest with you. I've got issue with it. These are not city employees. We have spent a tremendous amount of money last week agreeing to fund our city employees and get them caught up. If I remember correctly, it was about $600 and some thousand, right? So now we're going down a rabbit hole where we are talking about literally funding non-city employees, and that's a problem. There are a lot of companies that do a lot of business with our city, and I could see them lined up out the door saying, hey, they're not city employees, and you gave them money for the employees they furloughed. What about our employees that we had to furlough? And we do work for the city. So I love the folks up at the event center. I have friends that work there, but when we're talking about city money going out to non-city employees for something like this, I just have to say it doesn't sit good with me. So.
Carter or Tim, maybe you can answer this, but the majority of the employees with Spectre right now were city employees before, correct? And when Spectre took over, our city employees became employees of Spectre. So without them today, the event center essentially would be starting all over again with new employees. Okay.
How long ago was that transition done, Mr. Mayor?
When did we move over to Spectre?
Mr. Mayor, we are coming into our 5th year of this relationship with Spectra, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, I think we finished 4.
Finished 4 total, yeah. The point that I want to make clear is this is a curtailment that Spectra volunteered to the city. Otherwise, we would be obligated to cover the full obligation of the subsidy, whether we protested or not. And so, while I certainly appreciate where you're coming from, Councilman, and I get it very, very clearly and so on, I don't know that we have a lot of option if indeed Spectre came back and said, we're going to go back to our contractual obligation and we expect you to live up to that. So I would offer that for your consideration, even though I recognize what you're saying is sometimes possibly hard to get around. I can appreciate that.
Councilman Nell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do want to respond. That was information I was unaware of. I did not realize that it was a voluntary action on their part to cut the budget. And so if we're just replacing part of that so they can take care of their employees, I guess I can see that. I was looking at this more of a broader view, and I didn't want the community who watches this and listens to us thinking they're funding non-city employees. Why can't I get my company funded? This is completely different when you have a company who's voluntarily given up part of what they're entitled to have through the city and then asking for a little more of it back. That's completely different. So, so with that said, I guess first thing is I'm not always right, and I'm willing to admit when I was wrong, and I think I may have jumped the gun just a minute there for you. So.
Councilman Gamros.
I think a little bit to Councilman L's original point, though. I was curious to know more about what the arrangement between the city and Spectra looks like. I guess I was surprised that the subsidy, I was aware of the subsidy, but I guess I was surprised that there was nothing built into the contract. The event center didn't have like hardly any events last year, and so I was surprised that there was nothing baked into the contract to take that sort of thing into account, because my guess is that the arrangement we have with them, the subsidy is because we believe we're going to get an ROI, because of the events that they hold up there and the amount of money people spend at lodging and restaurants and stuff. I imagine fiscally it makes sense for that arrangement. But again, if they're not holding any events or anything, so I'm just curious to know more about the arrangement. I don't know if we can see a copy of it or anything like that. But thank you,
Mr. Mayor, Councilman. It is a complex contract, but certainly I can get that in the info packet so everyone can review it. It is truly a partnership, and I'll just say with that, if we do better, meaning we come off that $994,000 that we're obligated as part of their contract, they get back 20 cents of every dollar they can reduce it. So there's a lot of interest in both parties to just keep chopping away at that subsidy. However, there really isn't much language that would really pertain to a pandemic. There's a force majeure type element to it, but obviously it would cost a lot of time, effort, and money, and possibly ruin a really good partnership going forward to really hash that out. Which is why I was really happy that they came to the table and said, hey, we'll reduce that from $994 down to $795. We were pretty ecstatic about that. It's just unfortunate that the pandemic's persisted in such a way that we can't realize it, you know, and it's not from lack of effort, it's just the way it's gone, you know.
Councilwoman Ingebretson.
Well, as we're currently still suffering through this pandemic, we still have no events planned and no potential plans of capturing anything. So say we give this money, but then, you know, or you're coming back in 3 months saying, I need more money, and then 3 months later, I need more money, and I need more money. And I mean, how much further along do we have to do this? Because we don't have an end in sight with COVID. And that's kind of my concern, is just that we've got this, and it's in place till 22, but we have no events. So you have no way of capturing any money to the event center.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, you're totally correct on some angst and some feeling of unknown there, because I share it with you. What I can tell you is we do have events that are occurring. You know, the first ones kind of start up the end of this month. I will say that when it comes to like March, you know, the end of February and March, where we start capturing some of our tournaments that are statewide, we really do need to have that facility up and running, because we've been informed by the school districts around the state that we're going to have events there regardless. And those are big events for our economy locally. So throughout February, we'll have more and more events, and it'll be building to we're in March. Hopefully you'll see much of what we're used to seeing, which is parents from out of town and kids from out of town in restaurants and hotels and stuff like that. And we're just hopeful that as we work with the governor and Alexia Harris, that we'll see our capacities just continue to increase. But I cannot tell you that you won't see us again saying, yeah, we couldn't even meet the 994 we were obligated to because of the persistence and things that we don't yet know of.
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Cortez, so is there a cap on what it is we would have to provide by way of subsidy in any given year?
Good question, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager. The answer is kinda. Basically, if they don't meet the 994, they have to cover up to half of their management fee up and above that. So if I remember right, that's around 60, high 60s, you know, as far as thousands of dollars that they would have to cover as a result of not meeting the cap of the 994. So then after that, then we're back on the hook for additional subsidies. So basically we can run up to about $1.067 million, and then it falls back to us to start covering an increased subsidy from there. Does that answer your question? So we have a little bit of a cushion there, but it's only about, you know, just shy of $70,000 if I remember correctly.
I think this is just more of a comment. You know, I just think that the event center has been underutilized for a great many years. And I don't know if there's a plan in place since we've gone through this pandemic and we've lost all this money, if there's a step up of, you know, efforts in fact to try to utilize that a little bit more and start generating some money, because the event center does sit empty quite a bit, and it's always been a little bit of a concern. And so if we're going to recapture some of this, we need to kind of step up the efforts to utilize that a little bit more.
Councilman Now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know, and I've spoke extensively with Brad, with Spectra, and I've talked to Carter, and I know prior to the pandemic, they had really turned a corner with the event center. It was really rocking. They had a lot of things going on. It was booked most of the time, actually. The pandemic is what stopped that. So Spectre really had done a good job of getting it moving in the right direction. And I'm just giving you this informationally because I felt like you did, and I really delved into it. And they had really turned a corner. It was doing really well. And the pandemic has just flattened. Now, the only concern I have now is making sure, and it's really no business of mine, but I'm just hoping that they're, you know, I know we've got the state tournaments coming up, and we're going to need to utilize that building. So I understand ramping up staff. But looking at this, it's talking about paying them all the way through the end of the year. And so, you know, if this thing doesn't lift, we're funding, you know, employees for 6, 8 months, with nothing really going on up there. And that's a bit of a concern, but that becomes more of a management issue and not an issue for us so much to deal with, I guess, but I wanted to put it out there. So, thank you.
Councilman Cassidy.
The question I was going to ask really gets into the nuts and the bolts of the 43,000 they're asking about. Because I understand the going to the 964. But in that 43, did the people that have been laid off, furloughed, this type of thing, were they able to get unemployment during that time frame? And is that unemployment being deducted then from any of the payments being made to them? So they don't wind up getting their salary plus unemployment?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's a good question. Just to be clear, this is a little different than the measure that council took last week with regard to kind of helping backfill city employees with what they may or may not have lost. This is not like that at all. This just allows those people that have salary reductions that are going to extend from now until the end of the fiscal year, basically till July 1, it just allows them to get the 20% back that they're not going to see. If we don't pass this measure, they'll still be at 80 cents on the dollar until the end of the fiscal year. This 43,000 is just to help them get back to 100% for the rest of the fiscal year. So what you're kind of posing, which is a great question, is kind of it's a moot point because it's not back paying them anything. But the answer to your question, were they getting benefits? I don't know about all of them, but some were for sure getting unemployment benefits.
And I'd like to make one other comment, is to reiterate what Councilman Nell was saying, that basically when this contract was signed back in 16, the whole premise was to utilize it more. And if you were to go back and look at the events, the types of events and the utilization, as Mr. Nell was commenting, that there has been a steady increase in the amount of utilization and the events that have been coming here. So we have actually done well in turning this over to an outside entity that books across this part of the country, because basically we're in the middle of their management area, going from, because they manage the Budweiser Center, Fort Collins, they have a place, I believe it's in Utah, and I think Rapid City as well that they're managing. And so they are able to start tying these things in with our event center, which when it was under city management, we didn't have those resources to get in and get into the booking agents and into that community, so to speak. And so this deal with Spectre has been a pretty good deal.
Councilman Gamros.
I'm sorry, this is just something I've been struggling to wrap my head around, so I appreciate the patience. So last year, Spectra voluntarily reduced the benchmark from 994 to 795, which was a reduction of what is that, 120, 200, yeah. Sorry, it's late in the evening. And so they're asking for that to be returned. I'm sorry, I'm just really struggling with the concept of a subsidy and how this arrangement works. So if we get to a point where we're going to be voting on it, I'm afraid I'm still going to be pretty naive to what this is all about. So I guess that's just my only concern. I still don't quite comprehend exactly what this arrangement looks like. But.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I'll try to simplify it as best I can. Hopefully I can help you with that. The 795, we just all recognize we're not going to meet the 795. It's just because of the pandemic, the way it's persisted. Regardless.
I'm so sorry, Tim. Reach the 795, is that revenue generated? What is this? What is that figure?
That's just subsidy levels, so that would be kind of expenses less the revenue generated.
Okay.
And so basically you think of the event center, it's kind of like a $3 million operation that only recovers $2 million back in revenue. So the city of Casper essentially is always on the hook year after year for about $1 million to kind of just keep it going. And so, we can get that ROI on an annual basis for restaurants and hotels and such. What we're saying is out of that $1 million, I'm just kind of rounding up to make it simple. We were hoping to be closer to 800,000, and that was that agreement that we had. Because of the persistence of COVID, we're not going to realize the 800,000. We're going to be more in the 925 range. What you have in front of you today is I'm coming to you telling you we're going to be around the 925 regardless of what you do tonight. And if this thing continues to persist, or we can't do our tournament, say in March, which we don't have any indication that that's the case, it could get worse, to the councilwoman's point. What we're asking for is $40,000 on top of the 920 to bring, when everyone does come back on board on the 1st of February, everyone's getting paid 100% of their salary, their normal salary and wage.
Okay. Thank you. That helps.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, that's all we had with regard to that particular
Okay.
item and the pre-meeting agenda.
You have anything on agenda review?
No, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I had one question on the agenda review. On the communication, under the parking lot cameras, the other bids were not listed on the memo. Do we know what those were and how were they in comparison to the one that we're taking?
With the mayor's permission, we could certainly invite Ms. Becker up or Mr. Beamer up that could help us kind of see what that cross cut looked like, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Mayor, Councilman, I can probably help, but then Liz may have to finish it off. This is not a true bid, and like you might expect, this is more of a design build type of services where we brought firms in to ask about their qualifications and their equipment and what they could provide for us. And so it wasn't selected solely on price, but their abilities and expertise and along those lines. But I know there were four firms, 3 were interviewed, and Alliance, I believe, was the successful firm. So, but I was not part of the interview team. I know Liz was, so she can probably shine a little more light on it than I can.
Your Honor, members of council, we did have the 4 proposals, and Hackett Systems proposed $49,809. Alliance you do have in front of you. We had High Tech Communications, and their proposal was $77,137. And then we had Long Technologies, and their proposal was in 2 options, and the option that we would have looked at was $144,573.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilwoman Ingebrigtsen.
Can I get some backstory on this? It's just because, have we had cameras there before? And then why there's a need for cameras now?
Mr. City Manager?
Liz, why don't you come back up?
Liz?
There is, actually, and security cameras has been a project that's been recommended as an improvement for the garage facility for some time. And indeed, when we brought on our private partner who manages that facility for us, they too agreed that having some security cameras would be a critical upgrade with respect to the number of the complaints that we get from users who are in there at night and those kinds of things. And so in terms of the additional detail, though, if I could have Liz walk us through some of that.
Your Honor, members of council, yes, we did have a camera system. It was inferior in the ability that it was not able to capture the imagery that our police department would like to see, as well as the actual operators to be able to get license plate information, vehicle descriptions. So as part of the capital plan a year ago, We went through a process, and I had asked for funding to do upgrades to the parking facility, which we had not had for a number of years. We, at the same time, were looking for an operator, but the three projects, in fact, for our parking garage were, in fact, the cameras. We had done lighting the year before to make it a lot brighter, that with 115 much higher powered lights. But we added on this last year the security camera project, improved signage, which this council, previous council wanted. And then we're also going to a ticketless system, looking at either cards or license plate readers. So we're beginning to get into that project. That one I'll be bringing forward to you in the next few months. So we've got the three projects we're working on to improve that asset. As far as the new, we initially had hoped to get 22 cameras. With what we're working on with Alliance, we're looking closer to 33 cameras. These cameras are positioned in places so that we can get truly a bird's eye view of all 5 levels. And we're also getting angles into the elevator areas too. That way we'll be able to look at any graffiti that might be occurring there, as well as any other behaviors that might not be something that we want as a city. So it was a very thorough process. We're very pleased with the responses we got from the 4 local contractors. We also had Republic Parking weigh in on their review, since they do parking garages all over the country in 1,400 other locations. They gave us some insight too, and worked with our IT department, so that, again, the imagery and the ability to capture it into even our IT system will be something that'll be long lasting. And again, we need that for this city asset. Okay.
Okay. All right, before we begin this evening, I'd like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones at this time. And I now call the January 19th, 2021 regular council meeting to order. The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, excuse the absence of council member Lutz and Councilman Johnson.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, second by Councilmember Pollock. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Council meetings are also televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Could I have a member of the Youth Council lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay. Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the January 5th, 2021 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on January 13th, 2021.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Nell, second by Councilmember Engelbretson. Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the January 19th, 2021 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Pollock and second by Vice Mayor Pacheco. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye. Aye. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Now's the time we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address. Direct all questions and comments to the mayor and only the mayor. No personal attacks on staff or council will be tolerated. Council will not respond to personnel matters. These will be referred to our city manager. Questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by council members. Presentations will be limited to 5 minutes, and duplication of speakers will not be allowed, nor will time extensions be permitted. And please note that public hearings and ordinances each have their own comment period. So please hold your comments on those items until we have reached them. Is there anyone that would like to address council? Okay. Please read the consent agenda titles.
Establishing February 2nd, 2021 as a public hearing date for the consideration of the following 3 items. Item 6A1A, the vacation of a portion of East 7th Street. Item 6A1B, repealing ordinance number 54-00 as codified by Article 4, Chapter 9.40 of the Casper Municipal Code titled Sale of Nicotine Products. And item 6A1C, new restaurant liquor license number 43 for Ludovico, doing business as Ludovico, located at 1301 Wilkins Circle.
The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing dates just read.
So moved. That was me.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilman Gamroth, second by Councilmember Engelbrechtsen. Any abstention or nay votes?
Abstain from item 1C.
Okay. Any other abstentions or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With the abstention of Councilmember Pollock noted, motion passed.
On the agenda is a public hearing for the repealing of ordinance number 54-00. This public hearing needs to be canceled because council will be considering this matter in a public hearing on February 2nd, 2021. The council would entertain a motion to, by minute action, cancel the public hearing concerning the repealing of ordinance number 54-00.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Pacheco, second by Councilman Cathy. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the plat of Highland Park Cemetery, edition number 2. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier dated December 21, 2020. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated January 6, 2021.
Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Pursuant to requirements of the statute, which indeed has changed in recent years, we are under the obligation to complete the plat for the Highland Park Cemetery, which over the years has been done in pieces and parts and never been completed in its entirety. With regard to what you see on the screen here, as it relates to the plat being proposed, we will have on record here now, as a part of this plat, the guidance for almost 30,000 plots that are available at the cemetery moving forward. Certainly, as we expand the cemetery and grow the amount of plots that will be needed into the expansion area that you can see to the south of that of the developed area, we will need to address the plat again in order to keep with the current regulations that the statutes dictate. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, this would be our first reading, and indeed would be ultimately approved and adopted with successful 3-reading process.
Okay. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the plat of Highland Park Cemetery, edition number 2, to please approach the lectern. None of these screens are working up here. That's what he's saying. Thank you. Okay, and at this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the plat of Highland Park Cemetery, edition number 2, to please approach the lectern. Okay, there being no one to speak for or against the issues involving the plat of Highland Park Cemetery Edition Number 2, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only. Oh, sorry.
An ordinance approving the plat of the Highland Park Cemetery Edition Number 2.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Kathy, second by Councilmember Engelbrechtson. Any discussion? Mr. City Manager, this is the plot of land that we've had a lot of discussion on lately at Conwell and 12th, correct?
Mr. Mayor, the portion that you're referring to is certainly that open space right here that is a part of the expansion area of the cemetery. The majority of the platting work, however, took place obviously up in here where those plots are currently laid out and now mapped appropriately.
Okay.
It's all right.
Councilman Gamros.
Just wanted to point out it's on page 111 of the work packet for council members or anyone watching that's interested. It's a big work packet.
It is. It's not the biggest, though. Any further discussion? Okay, any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye? Aye. Please record the vote.
Members voting aye, motion passed.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the annexation and plat creating the East Robertson Road addition and 3489 South Robertson Road. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Thank you, Mayor. 2 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier dated January 6, 2021. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated January 6, 2021.
Mr. City Manager, you have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As your exhibit would indicate here, the area that we're talking about is located east of Robertson Road and north of the Robertson Road bridge crossing of the river. This is an area that is not only surrounded by the limits of the city at this point in time, but also to some degree constrained by agreements that allowed for utility services to be extended into the area, that for some of the properties, many of the properties included an agreement to annex when council saw fit to do so. We're proposing that time is now. Indeed, this area represents almost like an island in the community, and with the potentially successful annexation of this area would mean that those individuals that live there would then get to be calculated with regard to sales taxes that would be adjusted towards the city of Casper, which does not include additional taxes with respect to the individuals that live within this subject area. With that, Mr. Mayor, we are suggesting favorable approval of this motion.
Okay. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. At this time, I'd ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the annexation to please approach the lectern. All right, at this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the annexation to please approach the lectern. All right, there being no one to speak for or against the issues involving the annexation, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
Oh, my apologies. Let me pull that up. An ordinance approving the plat of the Highland Park Cemetery, Edition Number 2. My part, I'm sorry. Approving the city-initiated annexation of the East Robertson Road addition and a council-initiated rezone of the property located at 3489 South Robertson Road.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Pacheco, second by Councilman Gamroth. Discussion? Councilman Nell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I'm surprised this hasn't came before council before this. It seems like a no-brainer. I guess I'm curious what the downfalls are. Are there any?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Nell, thank you for that question. Generally speaking, residents tend to have some hesitancy with regard to annexation issues of this nature because of a typical perception that their use of their property will diminish or change or be reflected differently. In this circumstance, we do have the flexibility, given its relative consistency with the master plan, to allow for a fairly flexible agricultural application of a zoning classification that does allow for acre-sized parcels. It allows for, uses that are more consistent with a rural subdivision. And so in a lot of ways, I think we've met a lot of those needs with the approach that we're taking today. The other issue that tends to arise in these public meetings and discussions is the idea of increased taxes and whether or not coming into the city means that they pay more. Generally speaking, that's a misperception. In this particular case, ironically, the residents of this area should have always been charged 1.5 times for the water and sewer that they enjoy over and above what citizens within the city pay. In this case, for whatever reason, years and years ago when these services were extended there, those rates were never applied. And so should this not pass, again, ironically, their rates would go up to remain in the county because we would have the obligation of making sure the appropriate rates are being charged from this point forward. So not always what happens in these scenarios, that's for sure, but in this case, this would be advantageous for the landowners.
Councilwoman Egger-Ritson.
From my understanding, these are county, correct? And so do all of these properties have city water and sewer? Weren't they opted to, some of them still are on wells while others have opted to be on city water?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, the services are available right in this immediate area. And as a result, there are people who take those services right now. If indeed we do have those who, for whatever reason, are still on septic or whatever, the stipulations with respect to DEQ will require that they connect into city sewer because of its proximity to the subject property. That is not a feature of annexation, however. That is a feature of being adjacent to sewer, whether they're a county resident or a city resident at all. So those issues are not contingent upon annexation. They're contingent upon their location next to an active sewer system.
Yeah, I was just curious if the city wouldn't be obligated to provide them services when they haven't taken advantage of that before.
Right.
Councilman Gamroth.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager Napier, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were speaking about potential sales tax and whatnot, should this be annexed and rezoned. Didn't we have a property owner approach council about the prospect of building a coffee shop in this area? I just thought that would be relevant since we had a property owner saying that he'd like to start a business in the proposed area. So, but again, correct me if I'm mistaken on that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gamroth, you're correct. There is a business owner that is moving forward with the development of a kind of a drive-through coffee shop, if you will. And that business would be located actually within city limits outside of the annexation area. And so, yes, they're moving forward, but yes, also they're going to be in city limits already. You bet.
Councilmember Polk.
Mr. City Manager, my question is not so much related to this specific annexation, but the process of annexation generally. I think looking through the Generations Casper report, there were some pretty specific guidelines about what is advantageous to annex and what is maybe not advantageous to annex. And I'm curious, to what extent do those guidelines factor into the city's annexation recommendations? Are we utilizing those guidelines as we make these annexation decisions?
Mr. Mayor, council member, you are 100% correct. And as a matter of fact, those guidelines that you identify very much do drive our motivations, if you will, and the recommendations that we provide to you. You will notice, were you to review the overall citywide map, that we still do have islands of service within our jurisdiction. And the reason we haven't really attempted to clean those up, at least at this point, is mostly because of just exactly what you identified right now. The streets are dirt or gravel and would require the city to bring those up to city standards. There's a whole host of reasons that we would probably not bring areas like that forward for consideration for annexation, because the payout as it relates to that margin of increase that sales taxes would be calculated in the city's behalf would not pay out for probably a century with regard to the ROI that we would get on those dollars. Yeah.
Any further discussion by anyone? Okay. Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? And I will be abstaining from this.
I'm abstaining as well.
Okay. All voting aye?
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With the abstention of Mayor Friel and Councilmember Engebretson noted, motion passed.
All right, please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance amending Chapter 9.24 of the Casper Municipal Code, offenses against public decency, modifying certain sections and creating new sections thereof.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, second by Vice Mayor Pacheco. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. Okay. With no speakers, discussion? Any amendments?
Your Honor, I move to amend section 9.24.050, subsection A, deleting reference to Wyoming State Statute section 6-4-104 on line 3 and replacing it with Wyoming State Statute section 6-4-101 to correct the typographical error.
Okay, there's a motion made by Vice Mayor Pacheco to essentially change the state statute or correct the state statute, as there was a typo referring to 6-4-104 when it should have referred to 6-4-101. Do I have a second? Second. Second by by Councilman Cathy. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye?
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion to amend passed.
Okay, back to after it's been amended. Is there any further discussion? Any further amendments? Any abstention or nay votes on the amended? All voting aye? Aye. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance amending section 10.24.010 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to 20-mile-per-hour speed zones.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Kathy, second by Councilmember Pollock. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. Is there anybody who would like to comment on this? All right, with no comments, any discussion? Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 9A1, amendment number 1 with Jacobs Engineering Group for the North Platte Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation Project. Item 9A2, a contract with Alliance Communication and Technologies for the Downtown Parking Structure Security Cameras Project. Item 9A3, creating Local Assessment District 158, Coates Road Asphalt Pavement Project. Item 9A4, a memorandum of understanding with the Natrona County for the Coates Road Surface Improvements Project.
The chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilmember Pollock, second by Councilman Nell. Mr. City Manager, would you like to make any comments on any of the items? Okay. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye. Aye. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 10A1, a purchase of 1 fire chassis and body from Max Firefighting Solutions. Item 10A2, authorizing council board and commissions appointments.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilmember Engelbrechtson and second by Councilman Gamroth. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay, at this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. Councilman E, being that I keep adding an L to your name.
I don't have any concerns at this time.
Okay. Councilman Gamroth.
The only thing I have is I'd like to, the Casper PD posted today, they're looking for help from the community for a suspicious incident that happened on the 13th. So I just encourage people to check out their Facebook page or their press release and assist if they're able to. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Nell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few things. First is, I'm going to ask you somehow to bring up some things for consideration for some further meetings, I guess, if you will, that I brought up last week. And I had to check with our city manager to find out how to get this stuff on the table, and he said, this is where I do it. So I guess the first thing I'd like to do is see if we can get something on the books. I met with, forgive me, Carter, you have to tell me his name. Andrew? Yes, met with him today concerning the parking situations on 12th and 13th and trying to alleviate all the accidents and everything we have out there. He did give me the clarity I needed. That is city property all the way to the sidewalk, and he is not opposed to us allowing the homeowner to revitalize that particular strip between the sidewalk and the curb, whether they want to pave it or whatever so that they can get their cars up on it. His only concern that he voiced to me was the people too close to the corner and being able to park up there on the corner and blinding people. So somehow I'd like to see if we can get some discussion going about trying to alleviate that for those people on both those one-ways. It's very dangerous, and I think it deserves our attention. Secondly, I would also like to see if we can't get, I remember Councilmember Powell, when he left, one of the comments he made is, when you want to do your capital improvements in your building and new things, you do them at a time like now when our funds are limited. And I really, really think we need to get back to not wasting $250,000 a year on rent and looking at building a police station and a dispatch center. and get that conversation moving again so that we can better facilitate our departments. We have people working out of room closets, and it's ridiculous. So, and other than that, the only other thing, if you'll, two more things, sorry. I did speak to some folks up at the Casper Speedway. It's under new direction this year as the council gave out a new lease. The crow's nest up there is dangerously close to falling down. We need to get an engineer up there and get that looked at. It's a huge liability for the city if that comes down when there's people in it. And the concession stands, our own code people shut those down and said they're not up to code, yet we own them. And so I think if we're gonna lease a piece of property to someone, it should at least be operable for them. They're missing out on $3,000 to $4,000 a night by having to have food trucks because they can't utilize our own facilities that we've since abandoned apparently. And then lastly, for the public's, I guess, I really want to be clear on the tobacco, the 54.00. I think what the public doesn't understand is some of the backlash I've been getting is I am in agreement with the public who's contacted me recently. I think if we could send a young man to war at 18 years old, I think if he wants to go smoke a cigarette, he should be able to do so. The problem with that is it's not about what I think. The state law says he has to be 21 years old. And if we don't amend our stuff to get in line, our ordinances, to get in line with the state, it's actually harder on our youth because it sends them to circuit court instead of being able to deal with it in municipal court. So I guess I want people to understand why we're getting on board and getting behind this. It's not that we want to regulate our youth, it's that the state's already done it. And if we get in line, it makes it better for them. It actually helps our police department and it helps our youth. That's why I'm behind that. And with that, I have nothing else. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Pollock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two things tonight. The first is after receiving an email from a citizen wondering about our process for removing items from consent agenda, I thought it might be useful to discuss at some point, whether now or in the future, what the process is, and for the public listening, but also amongst ourselves to evaluate if we are comfortable with that process. I thought some of the items the citizen brought up, like such as having a cap on the amount of money that could be spent in consent versus pulling those items off individually so people could comment on them for some of the higher ticket items, might be beneficial for transparency's sake. So that's my first. And then my second is I wanted to explore at a future meeting the possibility of creating some sort of public awareness campaign. I'm really not sure exactly how to go about that, but after listening to testimony from the Council for People with Disabilities and also receiving some emails on that, and investigating with the City Manager's office, what entities are responsible for snow removal and ice mitigation at the numerous bus stops around town. It seems that most of that responsibility falls on property owners, and I'm not sure how much awareness folks in town have about that responsibility that they have. And I really think that the vast majority of folks, knowing what issues are arising, would happily take the extra effort to make sure those areas are cleared, to make sure that their sidewalks are cleared all the way down into the crosswalk so people can be getting across. But I'm thinking that there just maybe is some disconnect as to, what people's responsibilities are there. So I think a lot of that could be settled without any budget or line items or anything like that, mostly just an awareness campaign to help people understand that, where the issues lie and what they can do to help make the community more accessible for folks with disabilities and everyone else, honestly. So, and that's all for me.
Okay. Mr. Henley, is that something on the consent resolutions we could put together for a work session, just to have a quick topic on that?
I think that's a good idea, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilman Cathy.
Nothing of major importance. There was a good water board meeting today. Several of us went, and nothing really major came about. They're on schedule, doing well, doing maintenance. They're really happy with some of their new things going on there with their automation system to help out. The other thing I was going to mention, and I know, gosh, must have come with the seat, but COVID, because former Councilman Powell used to always harp on that from this chair, but during the last week and a half, we have had one of our company employees, not city, but our company employees pass away from COVID. And as anybody that listened last week, I did not contract COVID, but my wife did, and so we have both been under quarantine, and that was finished on Sunday. So people, please be aware of who you're around. The masks, yes, I hate the masks. I have an issue with sinuses, and wearing a mask compounds that, but by the same token, I have seen the longs and the shorts of COVID, and for some of the older people, it can be very dangerous to them. And just please try to help out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Pacheco.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything to report. I do have a small statement I wanted to make tonight, and probably in the same regards of where Councilman Cathy was coming from. 2 weeks ago, my aunt and my godmother passed away from the complications of COVID-19. I mention this not because I'm seeking sympathy or attention from anyone, but to acknowledge that we are still faced with the threat of this pandemic. While we have the vaccine and we're making strides in that area and people are receiving it, we also know that this is going to take time. The vaccine is not a magic bullet and will not immediately resolve the spread of this disease. While we wait for the vaccine to fully be rolled out and to have that to all members of our community, to everybody in the country and around our state, we must commit to help one another by social distancing, keep gathering small, and yes, wearing your masks. While there are times that these small adjustments can be inconvenient, to me they are small sacrifices that can genuinely save lives, like my aunt's. With this in mind, I would like to take a moment to recognize our students and our teachers who have committed to wearing masks each and every day at schools. This small sacrifice helps to keep themselves safe and others from spreading COVID. I have 2 children who attend in the school district, and while they are not huge fans of masks, they rarely come home complaining about it. Rather, they wear a mask to help others and remain in school to learn. I am in awe of our youth and these students. I am humbled by them and their leadership. I have often said my hope lies with this next generation. It is evident in today's society we will need you. We will need you and your leadership now more than ever. That is why I find it so disheartening that several of our state legislators chose not to wear masks at the kickoff of the 66th Wyoming legislature, even in the face of our current health order. I am not naive to think we can force anyone to wear a mask, let alone grown men and women in the state legislature. I'm not ready to have that fight. I am acutely aware, though, that masks have somehow become political lightning rods here in Wyoming and around the country. However, now more than ever, I find a deeper respect and admiration for our teachers and our educators. So I want to say thank you for what you're doing. And finally, to the young people here, even that are here from our youth council, and the students in the district, I want to say thank you for showing leadership, maturity, and courage. Thank you for showing us what we can do and what we can be when we work together. Sometimes our youth are better examples than us adults. I encourage you to keep it up because we need you, especially now. Thank you.
Okay, is this a good time to talk about Unified Command?
Mr. Mayor, it is a great time, and we probably ought to get some direction on Councilman Nell's request as well, if that's okay with you. As the chair of the.
Which one?
He requested some consideration with respect to, I wrote it down here. Thank you.
I requested some direction in response to the police station and getting that back on the table.
Right.
And also, and I wrote it down.
I have the parking on 12th and 13th Streets,
That was it.
the Parkway, and then also the Speedway.
I wasn't necessarily looking for direction there. I was just hoping Carter could maybe talk to the engineer and get somebody out there to look at things. But I was definitely looking for consideration for getting the police station and dispatch center back on the table and trying to save that money and the property situation on 12th and 13th Street.
And I see that we have the police station as a future agenda item, so I guess we can get that back onto a work session agenda at some point. And then, as far as whatever direction you think is the best to move forward on 12th and 13th Street for the parkways. And then the other thing that is that good for direction there? Everybody good with that? Okay. Then, in the beginning of COVID, the past council gave thumbs up to a unified command, which is a joint between several entities, but the county, the city, the school district, the county health department. And we've gotten to a point now, and you can remember back when we started with COVID, we were having briefings 3 times a week, and we would break into live TV, actually almost every day for a period of time. They're breaking into live TV, and we had a command center set up, and it was a joint effort. Well, since then, it's really kind of dwindled down to where it's a pushed effort by county health. And county health is the one that has received the vaccines. They're the ones that put the vaccines out. They're the ones that have the game plan from the CDC. And unified command pretty much at this point is not being used. It's a effort by county health itself. So I would make the suggestion at this point that we do away with our portion on the unified command, basically pull that back and get back to some sort of normalcy and allow the county health, if they need our support, we'll certainly give it to them, but allow county health to take their plan as is and charge forward with it. And we'll certainly back them on what they need to do to get these vaccines out. But I would ask that as a council, we pull that command back. So, discussion or questions? Please. Councilman Nell.
I'm all for it. One of the things I do want to make clear, this is not a rebuttal to Vice Mayor Pacheco at all. I have gotten a couple emails asking me why I'm the only one in the entire building without a mask on. And if you look around, I'm the only one without one on. Well, I guess I want to make a couple things clear. I am socially distanced from everyone that's near me, and that's the only time my mask is off. Whenever I go to have a conversation with someone, or like when we went outside, I put my mask on, and I do that out of respect for everyone else. I personally, and everybody knows publicly, don't think masks work, and the reason I think that is when our own county health office comes out and says that during our spike, 85% of all cases happened in nursing homes and retirement centers. 85%. So pretty much 9 out of every 10 people in November when we spiked got it in that situation. So I'm of the opinion, if my mother's in there, I can't even go in and visit her. There are no visitors allowed in those places. They are cleaned over and over several times a day. All staff wears proper PPE, masks, and everything else. And yet, that's where everybody's getting infected. Do I believe COVID's real? Without a doubt. Yes, I do. But I don't think the masks are going to stop it. But out of respect for everyone else, when I'm in a situation where I'm not 6 feet away, I do put it on. So I just want to be very clear about that. I'm very, just because it's my belief, it doesn't mean I don't care about everybody else. And so if you'll notice, anytime I'm near anybody, it's on. So I guess I wanted to make that clear, and it was perfect timing because I got some emails saying, how come you're the only one without it on? Well, because I'm sitting here by myself. So that's why I do care about people. My heart goes out to you, Ray, and to all those folks who have lost someone suffering from COVID. It's horrible. And I'm sorry that you and your family and everybody else has to go through that. And that's kind of where I'm at on it. So.
Okay. Is there any other, Councilmember Pollock?
Just to your request, do we really lose anything by sort of dissolving this unified command, or is it basically defunct now anyway?
Mr. City Manager, you can jump in. I'll kind of sum it up and try and be polite in the way that I do it. But at this point, no, we're not really losing anything. You have certain entities that are involved in assisting in setting up. We're going to have the old Bon Marché. A portion of the mall is going to be set up to be a vaccination location. There are people that can assist in getting that set up, but they could do it whether we're under unified command or not. So we don't need to be in that role anymore. We can still use the agencies that would help us locate places that we need. That's more meant for, we have a pandemic, things are out of control, they're rapidly evolving, and all hands on deck. And realistically, right now, we have a game plan, we have the people in place to make that game plan happen, and if we need people to help us on the sides, they're still there. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I think the only thing I would add for Councilmember Pollock is that indeed, with the unified command being activated and still in effect, it kind of implies that the city should be dedicating resources to support that system and structure. And frankly, I'd prefer the clarity that says it's not really needed. You can kind of stand down and deploy your resources elsewhere and not really worry about it. So I'd be in support of that idea and moving forward with the preparation of a resolution that rescinds that unified command.
And I assume that we could just reinstate it should the situation change and we need to move back into that phase.
So we come back to council and ask if we needed to go back to that, but we would be reversing course at that point if, like when Unified Command came in, we had people that in an institution that were being released that potentially had COVID and had nowhere to go. And so then we needed to find locations for them. It was rapidly evolving and we needed everybody, all hands on deck. But now, not saying that we're out of the woods by any means with COVID, but we know the plan. We know what direction we're headed, and there's really no need for Unified Command. If it should change and it blew up all over again and we had all kinds of issues that would come up, then we could certainly come back and put it right back into place.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other discussion? Are we good with moving forward to the resolution to remove Unified Command? Okay. All right. And that's the only thing I had for this evening. So the next meeting of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, January 26, 2021 in the council chambers. And a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021 in the council chambers. Notice of an executive session to take place at this date and time and during this meeting was given. We have a matter to discuss regarding personnel. The matter of land acquisition will not be held tonight. Therefore, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session, and at the conclusion of that executive session to reconvene this regular meeting solely for purposes of adjournment of this regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Nell, second by Councilmember Pollock. There being a majority of members present and a motion to adjourn into an executive session having been moved and seconded, and that motion requiring a 2/3 majority of council present. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
A greater than 2/3 majority of the council present voted in favor of the motion. We are hereby adjourned into an executive session.
Carter, you reached for that in your hand.